Hi, my name is Hannah Allen, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm originally from Columbus, Nebraska, and I'm studying range and forage science. My research takes place at the Barter Brothers Ranch, which is in north central Nebraska in the Sandhills. And I study cattle grazing preferences and distribution on burned versus unburned landscapes in what we call a patch burn grazing system. A patch burn grazing system, it mimics historical fire and grazing, which would have been by bison, and wildfires or fires started by indigenous people. And bison had this preference for recently burned areas, and we know that cattle also have this preference. And so in patch burn grazing systems, they recouple that historical interaction where one quadrant of a pasture is burned every year. And cattle will selectively graze for that burn site, leaving other quadrants which were previously burned or unburned to rest. And so you get this structural differences between these recently burned sites and these unburned sites. And what I study is the cattle grazing preferences and distribution in this burned area. So we're really interested in how cattle use the landscape differently in burned areas, and also how their grazing preferences, so what plants they're eating, might be different in these burn sites. Prescribed burning is the purposeful placement of fire onto a landscape, and we're doing prescribed burning in the Sandhills, which it was historically there by wildfire or started by indigenous people. And with the absence of fire on this landscape, we've seen a reintroduction of a lot of woody species. And grasslands definitionally are the dominance of grasses and the absence of woody species and shrubs. And so what we've seen in the absence of fire is this invasion of woody species, particularly the eastern red cedar, which from a production standpoint harm landowners and cattle producers because grasslands are the best system for grazing cattle. But also from a wildlife perspective, the woody species will take over and could potentially completely change that environment. And so some birds and wildlife have this preference for recently burned areas and create a variety of habitat. I did not grow up in the Sandhills. I grew up on eastern Nebraska, which is like all smooth brome monoculture. So working out in the Sandhills has been really fun. I never really spent a lot of time out there until I started my graduate experience, but it's been really a beautiful place to work. I really enjoy being there all summer and seeing the seasonal changes in the landscape. I think it's like the most beautiful watercolor painting ever. You get like really beautiful forbs, and it's fun to see how the colors progress throughout the season. You start with like some purples, maybe some yellows, and then reds, and then towards the end of the season we have the golden wildflowers, and that's definitely my favorite part of working out there. So I did not grow up in agriculture. I was not raised on a farm. I come from a completely different background, and I actually was just in my major in college. I went to a small undergraduate university. It was just biology, like general biology, and I ended up randomly doing a summer internship with the university in rangelands, and I loved how there was like this ecological context to cattle management, and I was always really interested in agriculture and in animal science, but this is like a cool integration of all the things that I really like. In rangelands, there's such like a diversity of disciplines. There's freshwater fish, there's remote sensing, there's botany, there's more animal science focus. You can really do anything within grasslands, and that's what makes it like this really interesting and cool discipline.